Eyes lowered, Elliot Barnes pushed his mop through Westbridge Academy's gleaming corridors. Once a celebrated mathematics professor, now just a janitor, nobody noticed. When calculus teacher Victor Alden publicly humiliated scholarship student Deshaun Carter, something stirred in Elliot's carefully buried past. Smirking, Alden challenged the silent janitor to solve an impossible math problem as students raised phones to record the expected failure. Nobody at the elite school suspected that beneath the maintenance uniform lurked a mathematical genius whose brilliant career had been destroyed by academic sabotage. As Elliot's pen moved across the paper with practiced elegance, their laughter faded to stunned silence. The quiet man they'd ignored for years was about to turn their privileged world upside down. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The hallways of Westbridge Academy gleamed under the early morning light. At 5:30 a.m., while most of the city still slumbered, Elliot Barnes pushed his cleaning cart through the empty corridors, his footsteps echoing against the polished marble floors. The prestigious private school stood as a monument to wealth and privilege, a place where America's elite sent their children to be molded into future leaders. Elliot worked methodically, wiping down trophy cases that displayed the accomplishments of students whose parents' net worth exceeded the GDP of small nations. Photographs of alumni who went on to Ivy League schools and Fortune 500 companies stared back at him. His reflection in the glass showed a man in his 50s, with salt and pepper, hair cropped close to his head, his brown skin beginning to show the creases of age around his eyes. Despite the janitorial uniform, there was a dignified air about him, something in his posture or perhaps in the thoughtful expression that seemed permanently etched on his face. The morning routine was peaceful, exactly how Elliot liked it. No students to dodge, no teachers to awkwardly move around as he mopped. Just him and the building's quiet heartbeat, the gentle hum of the heating system, the occasional drip from a water fountain. By the time the first staff members arrived at 7 a.m., Elliot would have already cleaned most of the main hallways, bathrooms, and classrooms on the first floor. Principal Margaret Walsh was usually the first to arrive. She nodded to Elliot as she unlocked her office door. "Morning, Elliot. Looking good today," she said, in the same tone she might use to address a piece of well-functioning furniture. "Good morning, Ms. Walsh," Elliot replied with a polite smile that never quite reached his eyes. He'd been working at Westbridge for almost 3 years now, and most of the faculty still spoke to him as if he were part of the building's infrastructure rather than a person. By 7:30, more teachers began to arrive. Elliot retreated to the maintenance closet, exchanging his mop for a feather duster to work on the library before students arrived at 8:15. He moved silently between the shelves, dusting books that cost more than his weekly paycheck. As he worked, he couldn't help but pause at the mathematics section. His fingers lingered on a particularly well-worn copy of Advanced Calculus and Its Applications. He pulled it from the shelf and flipped through it, a small smile forming as he recognized familiar theorems and proofs. "Do you understand any of that?" Elliot turned to find Lily Porter standing in the aisle, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Unlike most Westbridge students, Lily didn't carry herself with entitled confidence. At 17, she was slight, with straight brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and glasses that she frequently pushed up her nose. "Good morning, Miss Porter," Elliot said, carefully placing the book back on the shelf. "Just making sure everything's in order." Lily looked at him curiously. "You always dust the math section extra carefully." Elliot's lips quirked up. "I suppose I do." "My mom works as a nurse at County General," Lily said, apropos of nothing. "People always assume she's just there to empty bedpans." Their eyes met in a moment of understanding before the bell rang, announcing the start of the school day. "Better get to class," Elliot said gently. "Don't want to be late for Mr. Alden's calculus." Lily's expression darkened at the mention of Victor Alden. "Yeah, wouldn't want that." She turned to go, then paused. "Have a good day, Mr. Barnes." "You too, Ms. Porter." Elliot watched her disappear down the hall, one of the few students who bothered to learn his name. With a sigh, he returned to his work, moving through the school like a ghost. By mid-morning, Elliot was cleaning the third-floor hallway when Victor Alden's booming voice carried from his classroom. The calculus teacher was in rare form today, his cultured accent slicing through the air like a scalpel. "Mr. Carter, if you spent half as much time studying as you do on basketball, perhaps you wouldn't be presenting us with such an elementary mistake." Elliot slowed his mopping, listening despite himself. "Sorry, Mr. Alden, I thought—" "That's precisely the problem, you thought. Mathematics requires precision, not guesswork. Your approach to this problem is like watching someone try to perform brain surgery with a butter knife." A few titters of laughter followed, and Elliot's grip tightened on his mop. He'd seen Deshaun Carter around the school, a tall, serious young man who stood out not just for being one of the few black students at Westbridge, but for the intensity with which he approached everything. The scholarship student kept to himself, shoulders perpetually hunched as if trying to make his 6'3" frame less noticeable in hallways filled with students who'd never had to worry about fitting in. The bell rang, and students streamed into the hallway. Elliot pressed himself against the wall, becoming part of the background as teenagers flowed past him, immersed in their conversations and smartphones. "Dude, Alden totally destroyed you in there," a voice said loudly. "Whatever, man, not everyone had private tutors since kindergarten." Deshaun's deep voice was tight with suppressed anger. "Don't take it personally. Alden's an equal opportunity asshole." Elliot watched as Deshaun broke away from the group, heading for the water fountain. The young man bent to drink, then straightened up, noticing the equation scrawled on the whiteboard. Outside the math club room. He stared at it, brow furrowed. Elliot glanced at the equation and immediately spotted the error. Someone had mixed up a derivative in the third step. He hesitated, then pushed his cart toward the water fountain. "Excuse me," he said quietly. Deshaun startled, stepping aside. "Sorry, man." "No problem." Elliot filled his bucket, then paused. "That equation's wrong, you know." Deshaun looked back at the whiteboard. "Yeah, I was trying to figure out where they messed up." "Third step," Elliot said, keeping his voice casual. "They took the derivative but forgot to apply the chain rule." Deshaun studied the equation again, then his eyes widened. "Oh, so it should be." "That's right," Elliot nodded, impressed by how quickly Deshaun grasped the correction. "You know, calculus?" Deshaun asked, surprise evident in his voice. Elliot shrugged. "Numbers make sense to me." He started to push his cart away. "Thanks," Deshaun called after him. Elliot raised a hand in acknowledgement but didn't look back. The faculty lounge was Elliot's least favorite place to clean. Unlike classrooms, which emptied between periods, the lounge was a revolving door of teachers grabbing coffee, complaining about students, or grading papers. Elliot tried to time his cleaning during class hours, but today he'd fallen behind schedule due to a spill in the cafeteria. As he emptied trash bins, Victor Alden and English teacher Sarah Peterson occupied the corner table, their conversation carrying across the room. "These scholarship kids just aren't prepared for Westbridge's rigor," Victor was saying, stirring his coffee with a silver spoon. At 45, he had the smooth, well-fed look of someone who'd never worried about making rent. His dark hair was expensively cut, his clothes tailored, and his bearing suggested he considered himself the intellectual superior of everyone in the room. "Deshaun Carter's very bright," Sarah countered. "He just has a different background." "Different is one word for it," Victor scoffed. "The boy can barely keep up in my class. I'm all for diversity initiatives, but not at the expense of academic standards." Elliot moved to the sink, washing coffee mugs left by teachers too important to clean up after themselves. "You're being unfair," Sarah said. "He scored exceptionally well on the entrance exams." "Tests can be coached," Victor dismissed. "Real mathematical intuition can't be faked. It's almost cruel giving these kids false hope when they're so clearly out of their depth." Elliot accidentally clinked two mugs together too loudly, drawing Victor's attention. "Careful with those, Barnes. Some of us bring our own ceramics from home." "My apologies, Mr. Alden," Elliot said, his voice neutral. Victor turned back to Sarah, lowering his voice slightly but not enough. "Speaking of people out of their depth, I caught our janitor friend here correcting a math problem on the whiteboard yesterday. Perhaps I should hire him as my assistant." He laughed at his own joke. You never know, Sarah replied, a hint of reprimand in her tone. People can surprise you. Please, Victor snorted. Next you'll suggest I take financial advice from the lunch lady. Elliot finished the dishes in silence, his back straight, his face a mask of professional indifference. As he pushed his cart out of the lounge, he heard Victor call after him. Oh, Barnes, there's a coffee stain under the economics table. See that it's properly cleaned, would you? Of course, Mr. Alden. Elliot turned back, going down on one knee, to scrub at a barely visible brown spot, acutely aware of Victor watching him, waiting for any sign of resentment or anger. Elliot gave him none, cleaning the spot with the same methodical care he applied to everything. During his lunch break, Elliot retreated to the small maintenance room in the basement. Unlike the gleaming spaces above, this room was cramped and utilitarian, with concrete floors and exposed pipes. It wasn't much, but it was the one place in the school where Elliot could truly be himself. He unwrapped his sandwich and opened a worn paperback, A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking. He'd read it dozens of times, the pages dog-eared, and annotated in his neat handwriting. A knock at the door startled him. He quickly closed the book, shoving it under a stack of cleaning supplies. Mr. Barnes? Lily Porter stood in the doorway, holding a brown paper bag. Sorry to bother you. I was just wondering if... I saw you reading in the library this morning, and I thought maybe... Did you need something, Ms. Porter? Elliot asked gently. Lily took a deep breath. There's a physics problem I'm stuck on. None of the other students want to help because they're all competing for valedictorian, and the teachers are busy with midterm prep. She trailed off, looking embarrassed. Elliot hesitated, then gestured to the folding chair across from him. I have about 15 minutes left on my break. Relief washed over Lily's face as she sat down, pulling out a notebook. It's about quantum mechanics and probability. I think I'm missing something fundamental. Elliot glanced at the problem, immediately recognizing the Schrödinger equation application. May I? He asked, reaching for her pencil. For the next 10 minutes, he guided her through the problem, never giving away the answer but asking questions that led her to discover it herself. When the solution finally clicked, Lily's face lit up. That makes so much sense. How did you learn all this? Elliot smiled slightly, handing back her notebook. Life takes you on unexpected journeys sometimes. I've heard rumors, Lily said hesitantly. Some kids say you used to be a teacher. Kids say a lot of things, Elliot replied, standing to indicate their time was up. Don't believe everything you hear. Lily packed up her things. Well, whatever the truth is, thanks for your help. After she left, Elliot sat back down, retrieving his book from its hiding place. The spine fell open to a page with a quote highlighted. Intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. He traced the words with his finger before closing the book and preparing to return to work. The final period of the day found Elliot cleaning the trophy case outside the gymnasium when he overheard Deshawn and Lily talking. Around the corner, I'm telling you, he knows his stuff, Lily was saying. He explained quantum probability better than Mr. Phillips ever has. The janitor? Deshawn sounded skeptical. Mr. Barnes, Lily corrected. And yes, there's definitely more to him than most people think. Huh. There was a pause. He did help me with that calculus problem yesterday. See? I think he might have been someone important once. Maybe a professor or something. So, what's he doing? Mopping floors at Westbridge? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Their voices faded as they walked away, and Elliot sighed. The last thing he needed was curious teenagers digging into his past. He'd come to Westbridge specifically because it was the kind of place where no one looked twice at the maintenance staff, where he could exist in anonymity, nursing his wounds in private. As he polished the glass case, his reflection stared back at him, a ghost of the man he used to be. Sometimes he barely recognized himself anymore. The passionate young professor who believed knowledge could change the world had been replaced by a quiet man who just wanted to be left alone. The question was, how long could he keep his past buried? The following week brought unseasonably warm weather for October, and many teachers had moved their classes into the courtyard to enjoy the sunshine. Elliot was emptying outdoor trash bins when he spotted Deshawn sitting alone under an oak tree, a textbook open on his lap, frustration evident on his face. Elliot continued his rounds but found himself circling back toward the young man. He'd been noticing Deshawn more since their brief interaction, how the other students subtly excluded him, how he stayed late in the library most evenings, how he seemed to be carrying the weight of expectations on his broad shoulders. "Trouble with the assignment?" Elliot asked, stopping a respectful distance away. Deshawn looked up, surprise flickering across his features before recognition set in. "Oh. Hey, Mr. Barnes." He gestured at the textbook. "Yeah, this integration by parts is kicking my ass. I mean, it's difficult." Elliot smiled slightly at the correction. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the space beside Deshawn. After a moment's hesitation, Deshawn nodded, and Elliot sat down, careful to leave his cleaning cart where it was clearly visible. The last thing he needed was someone accusing him of slacking off. "Show me where you're stuck," he said. Deshawn pointed to a complex integration problem. "I keep getting lost in the steps. Mr. Alden explains it like it's obvious, and when I ask questions, he just repeats the same thing slower, like I'm stupid." "You're not stupid," Elliot said firmly. "Different people learn in different ways. Let me show you a trick." He took a twig from the ground and began drawing in the dirt, breaking down the integration in a way that connected it to physical concepts. "Think of it as finding the area under a curve, but piece by piece," he explained. "Each time you apply integration by parts, you're trading a hard piece for an easier one." As they worked through the problem, Deshawn's expression transformed. From confusion to understanding and finally to excitement. "That makes so much more sense," he exclaimed. "Why doesn't Alden teach it like this?" "Some teachers forget what it's like to not understand," Elliot said diplomatically. Well, what do we have here?" Victor Alden's voice cut through their conversation like a whip crack. The calculus teacher stood a few feet away, arms crossed, his expression a mixture of amusement and contempt. "Mr. Carter, I wasn't aware janitorial staff had been added to the tutoring program." Deshawn quickly closed his textbook. "Mr. Barnes was just—" "I'm sure he was," Victor interrupted, his tone dripping with condescension. "But I wonder if cleaning the restrooms might be a better use of company time." He turned to Elliot. "Unless you've suddenly acquired a degree in mathematics I'm unaware of." Several students had stopped to watch the exchange, drawn by the unusual spectacle of a teacher confronting the janitor. Elliot could feel their eyes, hear their whispers. "I was on my break," he said quietly, standing up. "Just trying to help." "How charitable." Victor smiled thinly. "But I'm afraid your help might do more harm than good. Mr. Carter is struggling enough without well-meaning but misguided assistance." Deshawn's jaw tightened. "Actually, sir, Mr. Barnes explained it better than a professor with 20 years of teaching experience." Victor laughed, looking around at the gathering students as if inviting them to share the joke. "Perhaps next we should ask the cafeteria workers to perform surgery." A few students snickered, but most looked uncomfortable. Lily Porter, who had joined the growing crowd, stared at Victor with undisguised disgust. "You know," Victor continued, warming to his audience, "since our janitor friend seems so confident about mathematics, perhaps he'd like to try his hand at something a bit more challenging." He pulled a leather-bound notebook from his jacket pocket, flipped through it, and wrote something on a blank page, which he then tore out and held up. "This, Mr. Barnes, is a problem from the International Mathematical Olympiad, a competition for the world's most gifted young mathematicians. I use it as an extra credit challenge for my advanced students. None have solved it this year." His smile was razor-sharp. "Would you care to try?" The crowd of students had grown larger, and Elliot could see phones being pulled out discreetly. This was becoming exactly the kind of scene he'd spent years avoiding. Every instinct told him to walk away, to return to his cart, and disappear into the anonymity of his job. But then he caught Deshawn's eye. The young man looked mortified, angry, and somehow pleading all at once. Beside him, Lily watched intensely, as if the outcome of this moment mattered beyond the petty humiliation Victor intended. With a calm he didn't entirely feel, Elliot took the paper. He studied the problem, a complex proof involving non-Euclidean geometry and several variables. It was challenging, certainly, but far from impossible for someone with his background. "Well?" Victor prompted, clearly expecting Elliot to give up. "Too difficult for your recreational mathematics?" The courtyard had fallen silent. Even the birds seemed to be holding their breath. "Math is a language," Elliot said quietly. Meeting Victor's gaze directly for the first time. "Sometimes you just need the right translation." He pulled a pen from his pocket and began to write, his handwriting flowing across the page in elegant, precise notation. He worked steadily, methodically, each step building logically from the last, creating a proof that was both rigorous and elegant. Around him, students whispered and pointed. Several had their phones out now, recording openly. Victor's smug expression gradually morphed into confusion, then disbelief as Elliot continued to work without hesitation. After about 3 minutes, Elliot handed the paper back to Victor. "I believe that's correct," he said simply, "though there are other approaches that might be more elegant." Victor stared at the solution, his face flushing as he checked and rechecked the work. The silence stretched uncomfortably until it was broken by a slow clap from the back of the crowd. Heads turned to see Principal Walsh standing there, an unreadable expression on her face. "Mr. Alden," she said crisply, "I believe your next class starts in 5 minutes. Students, please proceed to your classrooms." As the crowd reluctantly dispersed, Victor thrust the paper back at Elliot. "A lucky guess," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. "Or perhaps you've seen this problem before." "Perhaps," Elliot agreed neutrally, tucking the paper into his pocket. "This isn't over," Victor said, low enough that only Elliot could hear. "I don't know what game you're playing, but I intend to find out." As Victor stalked away, Deshawn approached, Elliot, his expression a mixture of awe and concern. "Mr. Barnes, how did you—" "Practice," Elliot said simply, returning to his cart. "I should get back to work." "Wait," Deshawn called after him. "Could you maybe help me some more? After school, I mean. I really need to get my grades up if I want to keep my scholarship." Elliot hesitated, aware he was at a crossroads. Helping Deshawn would mean stepping back into a world he'd deliberately left behind, risking exposure and all the pain that came with it. But the naked hope on the young man's face made refusal difficult. "The library after last period," he said finally. "But we keep it casual, understand? I'm not looking for attention." Deshawn nodded eagerly. "Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Barnes." As Elliot resumed his cleaning rounds, he could feel the familiar weight of eyes following him through the hallways. The whispers had already started. The janitor who solved an impossible math problem, the cleaning man who outsmarted Victor Alden. By lunchtime, video clips were circulating on social media, and even teachers were giving him curious looks. In the faculty lounge, he overheard fragments of conversation. Must have been a fluke. Heard he used to teach somewhere. Probably just memorized that specific problem. He kept his head down, focusing on his work, but inside, a storm was brewing. For 3 years, he'd hidden who he was, buried his knowledge and passion beneath the safe anonymity of janitorial work. Now, because of one moment of pride, or perhaps principle, that carefully constructed shield was cracking. In the maintenance room during his afternoon break, Elliot found himself staring at his reflection in the small spotted mirror above, the sink. The face that looked back at him seemed different somehow, more alert, more present than it had been in years. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. He opened the door to find Lily Porter standing there, her expression resolute. "I found your papers," she said without preamble. "Online. Innovative Approaches to Harmonic Analysis in Multidimensional Spaces, published in the Journal of Advanced Mathematical Theory, 2002. You're not just good at math, Mr. Barnes. You were brilliant." Elliot felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "Ms. Porter, why are you working as a janitor?" she pressed. "What happened to you?" "That's a very personal question," he said quietly. "I'm sorry, but people should know." Mr. Alden treated you like you were nothing, and all this time— Please, Elliot interrupted, his voice firmer than she'd ever heard it. My past is my own. I'd appreciate it if you'd respect that. Lily bit her lip, clearly conflicted. But it's not right. Life rarely is, Elliot replied. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. As he closed the door behind her, Elliot leaned against it, eyes closed. The walls of his carefully constructed life were closing in. It was only a matter of time before Victor Alden discovered the same information Lily had found, and unlike the well-meaning student, Victor would use it as a weapon. The question wasn't if his past would be exposed, but when, and more importantly, what would happen when the full story came to light, because what Lily had found was only the beginning, the bright, promising start of a career that had ended in accusation, betrayal, and disgrace. The part of the story no one at Westbridge knew yet was the fall that had turned Professor Elliot Barnes into a man who mopped floors and emptied trash bins, a man who had traded recognition for invisibility, respect for peace. But peace, it seemed, was coming to an end, and Elliot wasn't sure he was ready for the storm. The video of Elliot solving Victor's impossible problem spread through Westbridge Academy like wildfire. Students who once looked through him now watched with fascination. Teachers nodded respectfully. The sudden visibility made Elliot deeply uncomfortable. Deshawn found him cleaning windows in the East Wing. Mr. Barnes, you've gone viral, Deshawn said, showing him his phone. 20,000 views already. Elliot sighed. Wonderful. You're a hero. It's like David taking down Goliath with a math equation. I'm not interested in taking anyone down, Elliot said quietly. I just want to do my job. But you could be doing so much more. Teaching, maybe. Elliot put down his cleaning cloth. Listen, what happened was a mistake. I shouldn't have risen to Alden's bait. So that's it? You show the world you're a math genius, then go back to mopping floors. That's exactly what I'm going to do, Elliot said firmly. Why? Deshawn demanded. What are you hiding from? Before Elliot could answer, Lily Porter hurried toward them, laptop in hand. Deshawn, I found something. She glanced at Elliot. About, you know. Elliot's stomach clenched. Don't let me keep you, he said, gathering his supplies. Mr. Barnes. Wait, Lily called. I think you should see this too. I'm not interested, Elliot said, walking away. They followed him, Lily reading from her laptop. Professor Elliot Barnes, doctorate from MIT, tenured at Princeton by 32, published 18 papers in top mathematics journals, recipient of the Wilkinson Prize in 2002. Elliot stopped, his back to them. You were nominated for the Fields Medal, Deshawn added. That's like the Nobel Prize of Mathematics. Elliot turned slowly. Where did you find this? Academic journals, university archives, Lily said. Your work is still referenced today, but after 2004 there's nothing. You just disappeared. What happened? Deshawn asked. Elliot looked between them, seeing their genuine concern. The memory of his downfall was still raw, even years later. Some things are better left buried, he said quietly. Now if you'll excuse me. He walked away, leaving them standing in the hallway, his past hovering between them like an unsolved equation. I'm telling you, something's off about this janitor, Victor Alden said, pacing Principal Walsh's office. No one solves that level of problem by luck. Margaret Walsh removed her glasses. Victor, I've got a board meeting in 20 minutes. What are you suggesting? Barnes isn't just a janitor. He has a background we know nothing about. His background passed our standard employment checks, Principal Walsh replied. And if he's good at math, that's hardly cause for alarm. Good at math? Victor scoffed. That problem was from the International Mathematical Olympiad. PhD candidates struggle with it. Principal Walsh studied Victor's flushed face. This seems personal, Victor. It's about standards, he insisted. I intend to find out who Elliot Barnes really is. If you won't support an official inquiry, I'll pursue it independently. Do what you must, but keep it professional, Margaret sighed. And Victor, no more public confrontations. That video has parents calling my office. Meanwhile, Lily had called her mother, Sandra Porter, a nurse who worked night shifts and attended community college courses. "Mom, does the name Elliot Barnes sound familiar? The janitor at your school? The one you mentioned was good at math?" "Yes, but I think he was more than good. I think he was famous. Did you ever take a class with Professor Barnes?" There was a pause. "Oh my God. The Princeton professor. I attended a seminar he gave at the community college years ago. Mathematics for medical professionals. He was brilliant. But didn't he get involved in some scandal?" "What kind of scandal?" Deshawn asked. "Something about academic fraud? It was a big deal in the academic world." After hanging up, Lily searched online. Here, an article from 2004. Rising star mathematician accused of falsifying research results. It says Professor Barnes was accused of manipulating data in a paper on chaotic systems, Deshawn read. The accusation came from Dr. Martin Graves, a senior colleague. An academic panel found significant concerns about methodological integrity, Lily continued. Princeton rescinded his tenure. Universities withdrew job offers. Journals retracted his papers. But it doesn't say they proved he did anything wrong, Deshawn noted. Just that he was accused. Here's a quote from Barnes. "I stand by my research. Time and proper review will vindicate my work." But there's nothing after that. No follow-up articles. The story just ended. A brilliant mathematician gets accused by a colleague, loses everything, and ends up as a janitor, Deshawn summarized. "Something doesn't add up. We need to find out more about this Dr. Graves," Lily said. "If Mr. Barnes was set up, maybe we can help clear his name." "Why would we get involved? This happened before we were born, because he's helping you, and because it's the right thing to do, and because Victor Alden is digging into this too, and he's not looking to help Mr. Barnes." 3 days later, Victor Alden had compiled a comprehensive file on Elliot Barnes. Principal Walsh confronted him in his classroom. "Victor, we need to talk about your TED investigation." "Perfect timing," Victor said. "I've discovered exactly who our janitor really is. Elliot Barnes was once the golden boy of theoretical mathematics before he was caught falsifying research data." He showed her his evidence. "The man cleaning our toilets is a disgraced academic fraud. Is this really someone we want around impressionable students? And what do you propose we do with this information? We can't have someone with a history of academic dishonesty working at Westbridge. The message that people deserve second chances? That a mistake shouldn't define someone's entire life?" "This isn't about second chances," Victor insisted. "Barnes lied about who he was." "Did he?" His application for a maintenance position didn't ask about academic credentials. It asked about maintenance experience and criminal background, both of which he was truthful about. "So you're just going to ignore this?" "What I'm going to do," Margaret said firmly, "is remember that Elliot Barnes has been an exemplary employee for 3 years, and I'm going to suggest you focus on your teaching rather than conducting witch hunts." That evening, Deshawn found Elliot in the library, shelving books. "Mr. Barnes, can we talk?" "About mathematics, certainly. About anything else, I'd rather not." "It's about Dr. Martin Graves," Deshawn said quietly. Elliot's hands stilled. "What about him?" "We found connections between him and Mr. Alden. They co-authored a paper in 2000, before what happened at Princeton, and they both received grants from the same foundation." A complex mixture of emotions crossed Elliot's face. "This isn't a mystery for teenagers to solve, Deshawn. This was my life, my career, my reputation, all destroyed because a jealous colleague couldn't stand being overshadowed. So it's true? You were innocent?" "The mathematics in my paper was sound. The methodologies were legitimate. But proving that became impossible once Graves poisoned the well. Academic misconduct allegations are like that. The accusation itself does the damage. But if you could prove it now—" "It's been 15 years, Elliot interrupted. "The academic world has moved on. I've moved on." "Have you?" Deshawn challenged. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're hiding. You don't understand what it's like to lose everything you've worked for, to have your life's work dismissed as fraud, No, Deshaun admitted. But I know what it's like to be judged unfairly, to have people look at you and see only what they expect to see. And I know what it's like to need someone to believe in you when no one else does. Elliot shook his head. Stay away from this, Deshaun. Victor Alden is looking for ammunition, and I won't have you caught in the crossfire. Deshaun reluctantly left, and Elliot returned to his work. The past he'd tried so hard to escape was circling back, and this time, there would be no running from it. The annual Westbridge Academic Showcase was approaching. This year, Victor Alden was the faculty coordinator, a role he took on with characteristic ambition and flair. 2 weeks after the math problem incident, Victor cornered Elliot in an empty classroom. "Barnes," he said, blocking the exit. "Just the man I wanted to see." Elliot continued wiping down the whiteboards. "Mr. Alden, I've been thinking about our little exchange in the courtyard. Quite impressive." "Thank you," Elliot said cautiously. "How? Would you like to participate in the academic showcase? A special mathematics challenge, you and me. A chance to prove that your solution wasn't just a fluke." Elliot put down his cleaning cloth. "Not interested." "No? Pity." The students were quite excited, especially young Mr. Carter. He seemed particularly invested in seeing his mentor perform again. "I'm not anyone's mentor," Elliot said flatly. "Of course not. You're just a janitor with a surprisingly advanced grasp of higher mathematics." Victor's voice hardened. "A janitor with a rather interesting past." "Oh yes," Victor continued. "I know exactly who you are, Professor Barnes. Or should I say, former professor. The academic world has quite a long memory for scandal. Is there a point to this conversation? Just this. You can either participate in my challenge, or I can ensure that everyone at Westbridge learns exactly why a once promising mathematician is now scrubbing their toilets. You've already tried that with Principal Walsh, I assume. How did that work out?" Victor's smile faltered slightly. "Margaret is a soft touch. The Board of Trustees, however, is considerably more concerned with the school's reputation. One anonymous email detailing your past indiscretions. Alleged indiscretions," Elliot corrected. "Semantics," Victor dismissed. "Accept my challenge or start updating your resume." Again. After Victor left, Elliot remained in the empty classroom staring at his reflection in the window. The face looking back at him seemed to belong to someone else, neither the confident professor he once was, nor the invisible janitor he'd become. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Deshaun stood in the doorway. "Mr. Barnes, I heard about Alden's challenge. The whole school's talking about it. News travels fast. Are you going to do it?" "I haven't decided." "You should," Deshaun urged. "You could show everyone what you can really do." "And what would that accomplish?" "Justice," Deshaun said simply. "Proving Alden wrong. Showing the world you're not what they think." Elliot shook his head. "Life isn't that simple. Some bridges once burned stay ash. So you're just giving up, letting Alden win? This isn't about winning or losing. It's about survival." Deshaun's expression hardened. "What if someone did that to me someday, tried to destroy me, took everything I worked for and turned it to nothing? Would you tell me to just accept it? To give up and hide?" The question hit Elliot hard. He turned away. "You wouldn't," Deshaun pressed. "You'd tell me to fight. Same as when you helped me with calculus. Same as when you solved Alden's problem. That was different. Was it? Or was it the first time in years you let yourself be who you really are?" Elliot was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "You remind me of someone, a student I had at Princeton, Jason Williams. Brilliant mind, but from a background where no one expected him to succeed." "What happened to him?" "Last I heard, he was teaching at MIT, leading his own research team. You helped him get there," Deshaun said. "I believed in him when others didn't," Elliot acknowledged. "But when my scandal broke, I disappeared, cut all ties." "Then maybe it's time to stop disappearing," Deshaun said quietly. Elliot looked at him for a long moment. "If I were to accept this challenge, I wouldn't do it alone." "What do you mean?" Want a student partner. You. Deshawn's eyes widened. Me? But I'm not. Not what? Not good enough? Not prepared? That's Alden talking, not you. A slow smile spread across Deshawn's face. When you put it that way, I'm in. The news that Elliot had accepted Victor's challenge, with Deshawn as his partner, spread through Westbridge like wildfire. The student body divided into factions, those supporting the underdog team of the janitor and the scholarship student, and those betting on Victor and his chosen partner, National Math Olympiad finalist Bradley Thompson. Lily appointed herself publicity manager for Team Barnes, creating social media accounts and rallying student support. Even some teachers privately expressed hope that Elliot and Deshawn would succeed. For the next 2 weeks, Elliot and Deshawn established a training routine, meeting in the library after school. Principal Walsh had quietly authorized their use of an empty classroom for practice sessions. The key, Elliot explained, is not just knowing the formulas but understanding the underlying principles. Mathematics isn't about memorization, it's about seeing patterns, making connections. Deshawn absorbed every word, his natural aptitude blossoming under Elliot's guidance. Why don't all teachers explain things like you do? Deshawn asked one evening. Teaching is its own skill, separate from subject knowledge. Some brilliant mathematicians are terrible teachers, and some people with modest mathematical abilities are gifted educators. Which were you? At Princeton, I mean. I like to think I was both, Elliot admitted. Teaching was never just a requirement for me, it was a calling. Their sessions often ran late, with Lily occasionally joining them, providing snacks and moral support. One night she arrived looking particularly pleased with herself. I got something that might help, she announced, pulling a folder from her backpack. Copies of the last 5 years' Advanced Mathematics Challenge problems from Victor's personal files. Deshawn gaped at her. How did you get those? Lily smiled mysteriously. Let's just say Victor left them out on his desk while talking to Mr. Phillips, and I happened to be returning a book report. The papers revealed Victor's pattern of problem selection, a preference for questions that emphasized obscure formulas over conceptual understanding. Armed with this insight, their preparation became more focused. As the showcase approached, the stakes continued to rise. Victor made sure Deshawn felt the pressure, making pointed comments in class about students who reach beyond their capabilities and set themselves up for public failure. But the more Victor pushed, the more resolved the trio became. For Deshawn, the challenge represented a chance to prove he belonged at Westbridge. For Lily, it was about justice. And for Elliot, it was something more complex, a reluctant step back toward the life he'd left behind. 3 days before the showcase, Elliot was organizing his notes when Principal Walsh appeared. Mr. Barnes, she said, may I speak with you? A moment. Of course. She closed the door behind her. I've been watching this situation develop with considerable interest and concern. I understand, Elliot said carefully. If you feel this challenge is becoming disruptive, that's not my concern, she interrupted. My concern is for you. I've known about your background since shortly after you were hired, she continued. My brother is a physicist at Berkeley. He remembered the controversy. And you hired me anyway? I hired a qualified maintenance worker with excellent references. Your academic history wasn't relevant to the position. Then what is your concern? That you're stepping back into a spotlight you deliberately left, perhaps without fully considering the consequences. Victor Alden is not a man who accepts defeat graciously. I'm aware of the risks. She nodded slowly. In that case, I have something for you. She placed a sealed envelope on the table. This arrived today. The sender was quite insistent it reach you personally. Whatever happens at the showcase, Mr. Barnes, know that you have a place at Westbridge as long as you wish to stay. After she left, Elliot opened the envelope and removed several printed pages. As he read, his face paled. The pages contained email correspondence between Victor Alden and Dr. Martin Graves, the man whose accusations had destroyed Elliot's career. Their messages revealed not just a professional relationship, but a deliberate conspiracy. Graves had mentored Alden early in his career and continued to advise him from behind the scenes. More damning were Graves's admissions about Elliot's case. Of course the math was sound, he wrote. That was never in question. But the academic board doesn't understand half of what Barnes was doing. They relied on my assessment as I knew they would. Another email, dated just 2 weeks ago, showed Victor reaching out to Graves about, "Your old friend Barnes has resurfaced at my school, working as a janitor of all things." Graves's reply was chilling. "History has a way of repeating itself. Let me know if you need any assistance ensuring he stays where he belongs." Attached was a brief note. Not everyone believed the lies. Some of us have been waiting for a chance to set things right. A former colleague. Elliot sat motionless, the papers trembling in his hands. After 15 years, here was proof. Concrete evidence that he'd been framed, that his disgrace had been orchestrated by a jealous colleague, and perpetuated by a network that included Victor Alden. The question now was, what would he do with it? Deshawn arrived for their evening session, full of energy and ideas. Seeing Elliot's expression, he stopped short. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Elliot carefully folded the papers and slipped them back into the envelope. "Not a ghost," he said quietly. "Just the past catching up to the present." Bad news? A strange feeling was growing in Elliot's chest, something he hadn't allowed himself to experience in years. It took him a moment to recognize it as hope. "Actually," he said, a new resolve hardening his voice, "I think it might be exactly what we need." The day of the Westbridge Academic Showcase arrived with a buzz of excitement, unlike any in the school's history. What had begun as a typical annual event showcasing student achievements had transformed into something far more dramatic, a mathematical showdown that had captured the imagination of the entire school community. The showcase was held in Westbridge's Grand Auditorium, a space usually reserved for graduation ceremonies and high-profile guest speakers. By mid-afternoon, every seat was filled. Students, faculty, parents, and even several local news reporters drawn by the viral story of the janitor who challenged the school's most formidable teacher. Backstage, Elliot Barnes stood quietly, the envelope containing the damning evidence against Victor Alden and Dr. Graves tucked inside his jacket pocket. He'd spent the night debating what to do with it, expose Victor immediately, save it as insurance, or simply walk away from the whole situation. By morning, he still hadn't decided. "You okay?" Deshawn appeared beside him, dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt borrowed from Lily's older brother. The young man had spent extra time on his appearance today, his usual casual confidence now tinged with nervous energy. "Just focusing," Elliot replied, smoothing down his own shirt. New, purchased specifically for this occasion at Lily's insistence. For the first time in years, he wasn't wearing his maintenance uniform, and the change felt both liberating and disorienting. "We've got this," Deshawn said, more to himself than to Elliot. "We've practiced everything Alden might throw at us." Elliot placed a steadying hand on Deshawn's shoulder. "Remember what I told you. It's not about the specific problems. It's about approaching them with clear thinking and confidence in your abilities." "Mr. Barnes," Lily rushed up to them, her face flushed with excitement. "They're almost ready to start. Half the school is wearing these." She held up a blue ribbon with Team Barnes Carter printed on it. Elliot shook his head in amazement. When did this become a sporting event? "When Victor Alden decided to make it personal," Lily replied firmly. "Oh, and a reporter from the local paper wants to interview you afterward, win or lose." "Let's focus on the task at hand," Elliot said, though the corners of his mouth twitched upward at Lily's enthusiasm. Principal Walsh approached them, her usual professional demeanor in place, but with an unusual gleam in her eye. "Gentlemen, they're ready for you. Remember, this is an educational demonstration above all. Keep it professional." She lowered her voice. "And if possible, make it memorable." As they moved toward the stage, Victor Alden intercepted them, his student partner Bradley Thompson at his side. Bradley was a senior with multiple math competition trophies to his name, handpicked by Victor for both his technical skills and his family's generous donations to the school. "Barnes?" Victor nodded coolly, his smile not reaching his eyes. Ready for your second act? Let's hope it goes better than your first. Elliot met his gaze evenly. Best of luck, Victor. Luck, Victor scoffed. This isn't about luck, it's about legitimate expertise versus whatever you're offering. His eyes flicked dismissively to Deshawn. Bold choice of partner. Though I suppose someone in your position can't be too selective. Deshawn stiffened, but Elliot's hand on his arm kept him silent. We'll see you on stage, Elliot said simply, guiding Deshawn past them. The stage had been set with 2 tables facing each other, each equipped with whiteboards, markers, and calculators. Between them stood a podium where the problems would be displayed on a large screen visible to the audience. A panel of judges, 3 mathematics professors from nearby universities, sat at a table to one side. As they took their positions, the auditorium lights dimmed, and Principal Walsh stepped to the center microphone. Welcome to this special mathematics challenge, a highlight of our annual academic showcase. Today, we have the privilege of witnessing an exceptional demonstration of problem-solving and mathematical reasoning between 2 teams. She introduced Victor and Bradley first, outlining Victor's credentials and Bradley's competition accomplishments to polite applause. Then she turned to Elliot and Deshawn. Our challenging team brings an unexpected but fascinating combination of experience and fresh talent. Mr. Elliot Barnes, who many know as a member of our maintenance staff, joins us today to demonstrate that learning and ability can be found in every corner of our community. His partner, Deshawn Carter, is a junior who has shown remarkable progress in mathematics this semester. The applause for them was noticeably warmer, punctuated by cheers from the student section, where Lily had organized their supporters. The format is simple, Principal Walsh continued. 3 rounds of increasingly difficult problems. Each team will work collaboratively to solve the problems within the allotted time. Our distinguished panel of judges will evaluate not only the correctness of the answers, but the elegance and clarity of the solutions. Let the challenge begin. The first problem appeared on the screen, a complex integration question requiring multiple techniques and careful attention to detail. Both teams bent over their whiteboards immediately, markers flying. Victor and Bradley worked with practiced efficiency, barely needing to communicate as they divided the problem between them. Across the stage, Elliot guided Deshawn through the initial approach, his calm voice barely audible to the audience as they established their strategy. The crowd watched in hushed fascination as the solutions developed on both boards. Victor and Bradley finished first, stepping back from their board with 2 minutes to spare, Victor's expression smug as he glanced toward Elliot and Deshawn, who were still working. With just 30 seconds remaining, Deshawn capped his marker and nodded to Elliot. They'd finished, their solution flowing across the whiteboard in neat, logical steps that looked noticeably different from Victor's approach. The judges conferred briefly before announcing that both teams had arrived at the correct answer, earning equal points for the first round. Victor's smile tightened almost imperceptibly as he prepared for the second problem. This time, the challenge involved a complex proof in number theory, the kind of abstract reasoning that separated true mathematical insight from mere computational skill. As the problem appeared on screen, a murmur rippled through the audience. This was graduate-level mathematics, far beyond the standard high school curriculum. Victor's confidence never wavered as he and Bradley attacked the problem, but their earlier synchronicity began to fray. Several times they erased portions of their work, starting sections over as they encountered dead ends. Meanwhile, Elliot stood back at first, studying the problem with Deshawn, discussing quietly before even picking up a marker. When they did begin writing, Elliot took an approach that seemed counterintuitive, working backward from what the proof needed to establish rather than forward from the given conditions. "What are they doing?" Someone in the audience whispered loudly enough to be heard. "That's not how you're supposed to solve it." But as the minutes ticked by, the elegance of Elliot's approach became apparent. By breaking down the proof into conceptual chunks rather than tackling it head-on, he'd created a framework that Deshawn could contribute to effectively. Their solution emerged piece by piece, the separate parts fitting together like a puzzle until the complete proof stood clear on their board. They finished with 3 minutes to spare, while Victor and Bradley were still struggling with the final connections in their proof. When time was called, Victor's board showed a technically correct but cumbersome solution, lacking the clarity and insight of Elliot and Deshawn's approach. The judges awarded Elliot and Deshawn higher marks for the second round, putting them in the lead. The audience reacted with surprised applause, growing louder as the significance registered. The underdogs were winning. Victor's face flushed as he glared at the judges' scorecard. He leaned over to whisper something to Bradley, who nodded tensely. For the final round, tradition dictated that the lead faculty member, Victor, would select the problem personally. He stepped to the podium with a thin smile, holding a sealed envelope. "For our final challenge," he announced, "I've prepared something special. This problem comes from recent research in chaotic systems analysis, a field that requires both technical precision and creative insight." Elliot stiffened, immediately recognizing what Victor was doing. This wasn't just any problem. It was deliberately chosen from the same field as Elliot's controversial paper, the one that had been at the center of his academic disgrace. As the problem appeared on screen, complex and intimidating, a hush fell over the audience. Even the judges looked surprised at its difficulty. Victor returned to his table, a satisfied smile playing at his lips. He'd designed this problem specifically to exploit what he believed was Elliot's vulnerable point, the very area where his academic integrity had been questioned. It was a calculated attack disguised as a mathematical challenge. Elliot stared at the problem, memories flooding back. The excitement of his original research, the devastating accusations, the academic hearing that had ended his career. For a moment he felt paralyzed, the old shame and doubt threatening to overwhelm him. Deshawn nudged him gently. "Mr. Barnes, should we start with the differential equation or the boundary conditions?" The young man's voice, steady and trusting, pulled Elliot back to the present. He looked at Deshawn, really looked at him, and saw not just a student seeking guidance, but a partner who believed in him completely. Drawing a deep breath, Elliot smiled. "Neither. Let's step back and think about what this problem is really asking." Instead of diving into calculations, Elliot began explaining the underlying principles to Deshawn, and by extension, to the audience. His voice, initially quiet, grew stronger as he walked through the conceptual framework of chaotic systems, making the intimidating mathematics accessible through clear analogies and thoughtful explanations. "This is like predicting weather patterns," he said, loud enough now for the front rows to hear. "Highly sensitive to initial conditions, but still governed by underlying principles we can identify and work with." The audience was captivated as Elliot transformed what Victor had intended as an esoteric stumbling block into an engaging teaching moment. Even the judges leaned forward, drawn in by his natural ability to illuminate complex concepts. Meanwhile, Victor and Bradley worked feverishly at their board, focusing on the technical mechanics of the solution without the conceptual clarity Elliot was providing. Halfway through the allotted time, Deshawn noticed something in the problem structure, a pattern that simplified one of the key components. "What if we approach this part from a different angle?" he suggested, pointing to a section of their work. Elliot's eyes widened as he recognized the insight. "That's brilliant, Deshawn. You're seeing exactly what matters most here." With renewed energy, they reconstructed their approach, Deshawn's fresh perspective combining with Elliot's deep understanding, to create a solution that was both rigorous and elegant. As they worked, Victor grew increasingly agitated, glancing repeatedly at their progress. With only minutes remaining, he abandoned his work with Bradley and approached the podium. "Before we conclude," he announced without authorization, "I think it's important for our audience to understand the full context of this competition." Principal Walsh stepped forward with a warning look, but Victor continued. "Some of you may be impressed by Mr. Barnes's facility with mathematics. What you don't know is that he's not just a janitor with an unusual hobby. He was once Professor Elliot Barnes of Princeton University, before he was dismissed for academic fraud in this very field we're exploring today." A shocked murmur ran through the audience. All eyes turned to Elliot, who had stopped writing, his back rigid. His paper on chaotic systems was retracted by the journal that published it. Victor continued relentlessly. His academic career ended in disgrace. These are verifiable facts that I believe are relevant to today's proceedings. The auditorium fell silent. Deshawn looked at Elliot with concern, while Lily stood up in the audience, her face pale with anger. Principal Walsh reached for the microphone, but Elliot stepped forward first. "Mr. Alden is correct about one thing," he said, his voice steady and clear. "I was once a professor of mathematics at Princeton. And yes, my career ended after accusations of fraud." He paused, reaching into his jacket to remove the envelope he'd been carrying. The audience watched, transfixed. What Mr. Alden failed to mention is that those accusations came from his own mentor, Dr. Martin Graves, a man who felt threatened by my research and the recognition it was receiving. Victor's face drained of color. "That's a serious allegation." "It is," Elliot agreed. "And unlike the allegations against me, mine comes with evidence." He held up the envelope. "Emails between you and Dr. Graves, discussing how he fabricated the evidence against me and how you've continued that relationship over the years, including your discussions about me since I began working at Westbridge." Whispers erupted throughout the auditorium. Victor stepped forward, his composure cracking. "This is preposterous. You can't possibly—" "I have the evidence right here," Elliot said calmly. "But that's not why we're here today. We're here to solve a mathematical challenge, which I believe Deshawn and I were in the middle of doing quite effectively." He turned back to their whiteboard, picking up his marker as if nothing had happened. "Shall we continue, Deshawn?" With remarkable poise, Deshawn nodded and resumed working alongside Elliot, the two of them completing their solution while Victor stood frozen by the podium, his planned humiliation having backfired spectacularly. When time was called, both teams had technically correct solutions, but Elliot and Deshawn's approach showed a depth of understanding and clarity that Victor and Bradley's lacked. After brief deliberation, the judges awarded the final round and the overall victory to Elliot and Deshawn. The audience erupted in cheers, students rushing down to surround the winners while Victor and Bradley exited the stage quietly, Victor's face a mask of barely controlled fury. As Principal Walsh officially concluded the event, Elliot found himself at the center of a celebration he had never anticipated. Students wanted photos with him, parents congratulated him, and reporters pressed forward with questions about both the competition and the dramatic revelations. Through it all, Elliot kept a steadying hand on Deshawn's shoulder, making sure the young man received his share of the recognition. "This victory belongs to both of us," he told every reporter who approached. "Deshawn's insight was crucial to our solution." In the midst of the commotion, Principal Walsh managed to pull Elliot aside momentarily. "Those emails," she said quietly. "Are they authentic?" Elliot nodded. "I've verified their digital signatures. They're real." "We'll need to address this formally," she said. "The board will want a full investigation." "I understand." She studied his face. "Was it worth it? Coming out of hiding after all these years?" Elliot looked across the auditorium, where Deshawn was being congratulated by classmates who had barely acknowledged him before. Nearby, Lily was happily explaining the mathematical concepts to several impressed parents. "Yes," he said simply. "It was worth it." The days following the academic showcase brought a whirlwind of changes to Westbridge Academy. The school board convened an emergency meeting to address the allegations against Victor Alden, while local newspapers ran front-page stories about the janitor mathematician, whose brilliance had been obscured by false accusations. Academic journals that had once distanced themselves from Elliot began reaching out, requesting interviews and offering to review his original research with fresh eyes. The Princeton Mathematics Department chair personally called Principal Walsh, expressing interest in formally revisiting the misconduct case in light of the new evidence. For Elliot, the sudden attention was both vindicating and overwhelming. After years of anonymity, he found himself thrust back into the spotlight, his past and present colliding in ways he couldn't have imagined. "Mr. Barnes?" The voice belonged to Lily Porter, who found Elliot in his usual spot, the maintenance room during lunch break. Though he was still officially the school janitor, he hadn't cleaned a hallway since the showcase 4 days ago. A reporter from the Boston Globe waiting in Principal Walsh's office. They want to talk about your case. Elliot sighed, closing the mathematics journal he'd been reading. Another one? This one's different, Lily insisted. She's an investigative reporter who specializes in academic misconduct cases. She thinks your story could help change how universities handle fraud allegations. I've had enough of being a cautionary tale, Elliot said wearily. Then be an inspiration instead, Lily countered. Deshawn's waiting up there too. He thinks you should do it. The mention of Deshawn swayed him, as Lily had known it would. The two had formed a bond that went beyond teacher and student, something closer to family, built on mutual respect and shared experience. In Principal Walsh's office, Deshawn was, indeed, waiting, along with a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who introduced herself as Gabriella Reynolds. Mr. Barnes, she said, forgoing a handshake in favor of a direct, assessing gaze. Your story has all the elements of a journalistic bombshell. Brilliant scientist wrongfully accused, evidence of conspiracy, dramatic vindication years later. But what interests me most is what happens next. Next? Elliot echoed. The systemic issues your case exposes. The flaws in how academic misconduct is investigated. The career destruction that follows accusations, regardless of merit. She leaned forward. Your story could help prevent this from happening to others. Deshawn spoke up. That's what I've been saying, Mr. Barnes. This isn't just about you anymore. Elliot looked between them, considering. Finally, he nodded. All right, but I want to be clear that this isn't about revenge. It's about setting the record straight. The interview lasted 2 hours, with Elliot methodically recounting the events that had led to his downfall, the groundbreaking paper, the jealousy it had provoked in senior colleagues, the whispered accusations that had grown into formal charges, and the academic board that had been all too willing to accept Dr. Graves's expert testimony against him. The emails between Graves and Alden are smoking guns, Gabriella said, reviewing copies Elliot had provided. But I'm curious, how did you get these? They were sent to me anonymously, Elliot explained. From a former colleague. I still don't know who. And what's happening with Victor Alden now? Principal Walsh, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, answered. Mr. Alden has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. The board takes these allegations very seriously. And they should, Gabriella agreed. If proven, this represents a deliberate continuation of an academic vendetta spanning more than a decade. She made a few notes before turning back to Elliot. What are your plans now? Will you return to academia? The question caught Elliot off guard. Despite everything that had happened, he hadn't seriously considered what would come next. I haven't decided, he admitted. Mr. Barnes has been offered a teaching position here at Westbridge, Principal Walsh interjected. In light of recent events, we believe his talents could be better utilized in the classroom than in maintenance. Deshawn's face lit up. For real? You'd be an actual teacher here? The offer was made yesterday, Elliot confirmed. I'm still considering it. What's to consider? Deshawn asked incredulously. You're a born teacher. It's not that simple, Elliot said. Returning to teaching means stepping fully back into a world I left behind. It means being Professor Barnes again, with all the expectations and visibility that entails. Would that be so terrible? Lily asked softly. Before Elliot could answer, his phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it, then did a double take, his expression shifting from surprise to something more complex. Excuse me, he said, stepping out of the office to take a call. When he returned 10 minutes later, his face was flushed with emotion. That was Jason Williams, he told them. My former student from Princeton. He's at MIT now. The one you mentioned before, Deshawn remembered. Elliot nodded. He saw the news stories, said he's been trying to find me for years. His voice caught. He never believed the accusations, tried to defend me back then, until I pushed everyone away. What did he want? Lily asked. To thank me, said I. Changed his life by believing in him when no one else did. Elliot's eyes found Deshawn's. And to tell me he's bringing a group of his graduate students to Westbridge next week. Wants them to meet me. The significance wasn't lost on anyone in the room. This wasn't just a former student reaching out. It was an established academic publicly declaring his connection to Elliot, a powerful statement of support from the mathematical community that had once shunned him, after Gabriella left with promises of a feature article that would help clear Elliot's name. Principal Walsh took the opportunity to press the issue of his future. "The teaching position is yours if you want it, Elliot," she said, using his first name for the first time. "The board has unanimously approved it, pending resolution of the Alden situation." "I appreciate the offer," Elliot said sincerely. "But I need time to process everything that's happening." On his way out, Deshawn caught up with him in the hallway. "Time to process? Mr. Barnes, this is your chance to get back everything you lost, is it?" Elliot asked quietly. "What if I'm not that person anymore? What if I can't be Professor Barnes again after all this time?" "You've been him all along," Deshawn insisted. "Every time you helped me understand a concept, every time you showed me how to think about a problem differently, that was Professor Barnes shining through." Elliot was silent for a long moment. "I'm afraid," he finally admitted, "of failing, of being hurt again. That's normal," Deshawn said with unexpected maturity. "But you taught me that fear shouldn't stop us from doing what's right." He hesitated, then added, "And I think teaching is what's right for you." The following week brought more developments. Victor Alden, faced with mounting evidence of his connection to the Graves conspiracy, submitted his resignation rather than face a formal investigation. Several news outlets picked up the story, focusing on the broader implications for academic integrity. Meanwhile, Lily's documentary project, initially a small student effort, attracted attention from a local film festival after clips of her interviews with Elliot went viral online. She expanded her focus to examine how appearances and biases affect perceptions of intelligence and worth, featuring not only Elliot's story, but those of other overlooked individuals in various fields. For Deshawn, the aftermath of the showcase brought unexpected opportunities. Several prestigious summer programs reached out with scholarship offers, and his improved performance in Victor's class, now taught by a substitute, raised his GPA significantly, putting him on track for the college applications he'd once thought beyond his reach. But perhaps the most profound transformation was happening within Westbridge itself. Students who had never noticed the maintenance staff began greeting them by name. Teachers incorporated discussions of bias and presumption into their lessons. A new atmosphere of awareness permeated the campus, not dramatic or performative, but quietly significant. 10 days after the showcase, Elliot found himself standing outside Principal Walsh's office, hand raised to knock, when the door opened, unexpectedly to reveal a visitor leaving. Victor Alden stopped short, clearly as surprised by the encounter as Elliot was. For a moment, the two men stared at each other, the weight of their shared history and recent conflict hanging between them. Victor looked different, diminished somehow, the arrogant confidence replaced by a haggard uncertainty. He was the first to speak. "Barnes," he said simply, then hesitated. "I was just, finalizing the terms of my departure." Elliot nodded but said nothing. "I want you to know," Victor continued with visible effort, "that I wasn't initially aware of what Graves had done to you. When I discovered the full extent, I should have come forward." "Yes, you should have," Elliot agreed, his voice neutral. Victor's jaw tightened at the lack of absolution. "The board has approved a new mentorship program for disadvantaged students," he said, changing the subject. "It was one of my suggestions as part of my exit agreement." "A worthy initiative," Elliot said carefully. "They'll need someone to run it," Victor continued. "Someone who understands both academic excellence and the barriers that prevent some students from achieving it." Elliot studied the man's face, reading the unspoken message. This wasn't quite an apology, but it was the closest Victor Alden could come to offering amends. creating an opportunity that aligned perfectly with Elliot's strengths and values. "I'll take it under consideration," Elliot said finally. Victor nodded once, then moved past him down the hallway. At the corner, he paused. "For what it's worth, Barnes," he called back, "you were always the better teacher." Elliot watched him go, a complex mixture of emotions washing through him. There was no satisfaction in Victor's downfall, no real closure in his grudging acknowledgement, but there was something else. A sense of a chapter ending, making room for something new to begin. Inside Principal Walsh's office, Elliot found not only the principal but Deshawn and Lily waiting expectantly. "I was just about to send a search party," Margaret said with a smile. "We've been waiting." "I ran into Victor on the way in," Elliot explained. "Ah," she nodded understanding. "A complicated encounter, I imagine." "He mentioned the new mentorship program," Elliot said, "for disadvantaged students." "Yes, that's actually part of what we wanted to discuss with you." She gestured to the formal-looking document on her desk. "Your teaching contract, with an additional role as director of the Westbridge Mentorship Initiative, if you're interested." Deshawn and Lily watched him intently, barely containing their excitement. They'd clearly been in on the planning, waiting to see if their hopes for Elliot's future would align with his own vision for himself. Elliot picked up the contract, scanning the details. A full teaching position, a leadership role in a program that could make real difference, a salary that reflected respect for his qualifications and experience, and most importantly, a chance to reclaim the purpose that had driven him throughout his academic career, nurturing young minds, recognizing potential where others saw only limitations. "So," Deshawn prompted, when the silence stretched too long, "are you going to sign it or what?" Elliot looked at the eager faces around him. Deshawn, who had shown him the importance of standing up rather than hiding. Lily, whose curiosity and determination had helped uncover the truth. Principal Walsh, who had given him a chance when his world had collapsed. "I have one condition," he said finally. "Name it," Principal Walsh replied. "Deshawn serves as student co-director of the mentorship program, with appropriate compensation for his time, of course." Deshawn's mouth fell open in surprise. "Me? But I don't have any experience with—" "You have the most important qualification," Elliot interrupted. "You know what it means to be underestimated, to fight against expectations, to need someone who believes in you. That's something that can't be taught." The young man straightened, recognition of the responsibility and trust being placed in him, visible in his expression. "I won't let you down, Professor Barnes." Elliot smiled at the title, finding that it felt right again after all these years. "I know you won't, Mr. Carter." As he signed the contract that would officially transform him from janitor to teacher, Elliot felt the weight of the past 15 years beginning to lift. Not disappearing, the scars of his experience would always be part of him, but shifting, becoming the foundation for something new rather than a burden to be carried. Outside the window, spring sunshine bathed the Westbridge campus in warm light. Soon these hallways would be filled with a new generation of students, each with their own potential waiting to be recognized. And this time, Elliot Barnes would be there not in the shadows, but standing in the light, ready to teach, to mentor, and perhaps most importantly, to learn. 3 weeks after the academic showcase, Elliot Barnes stood in his new classroom, arranging textbooks and supplies with the same methodical care he once applied to his maintenance duties. The space still felt foreign to him, bright with natural light, walls adorned with mathematical posters and student work rather than utility shelves and cleaning supplies. He ran his hand along the smooth surface of the teacher's desk. His desk, now, still marveling at how quickly his life had transformed. The transition from janitor to mathematics teacher had happened with remarkable speed, driven by Principal Walsh's determination to have him in the classroom before the semester ended. Knock at the open door pulled him from his thoughts. Jason Williams stood in the doorway, a warm smile on his face. At 35, Jason had matured from the eager undergraduate Elliot had mentored at Princeton into a confident associate professor with his own impressive credentials. "Professor Barnes," he said, stepping into the room. "Still can't believe I found you." Just Elliot is fine, Elliot replied, embracing his former student. It's good to see you, Jason. You too, Jason said, looking around the classroom. This suits you better than a mop and bucket. Some days I'm not so sure, Elliot admitted. 15 years is a long time to be away from teaching. Like riding a bike, Jason assured him. Besides, from what I've heard, you never really stopped teaching, just changed venues. They settled into student desks that seemed too small for grown men, catching up on the years between them. Jason described his research at MIT, his recent marriage, the doctoral students he now mentored. Elliot shared quieter stories of his years in the shadows, small towns, odd jobs, the gradual rebuilding of a life far removed from academic prestige. Why Westbridge? Jason finally asked. After everything, why work at a school where someone connected to Graves was teaching? I didn't know about Alden at first, Elliot explained. By the time I realized, I'd already been here 2 years. It seemed safer to stay invisible than to run again. Jason nodded thoughtfully. And now? The press coverage is dying down, but your name is back in circulation. I've had 3 colleagues ask me about you just this week. Curious about the mathematical equivalent of Bigfoot? Elliot asked with a wry smile. Interested in your work, Jason corrected firmly. Your paper on chaotic systems, the one that Graves attacked, was ahead of its time. Some of the theoretical applications you proposed are just now becoming relevant, with new computational approaches. Elliot's expression grew distant. That research feels like it belonged to someone else, another lifetime. It was yours, Jason insisted, and it still matters. He hesitated, then added, There's talk at Princeton about a formal review of your case, with the email evidence and new computational methods to verify your original calculations. I don't need Princeton's validation, Elliot said, though something flickered in his eyes, a hint of the old wound that had never fully healed. Maybe not, Jason acknowledged, but science needs the truth to be on record. Before Elliot could respond, Deshawn appeared in the doorway, stopping short when he saw they had company. Sorry, Professor Barnes. I didn't realize you had a visitor. Come. In, Deshawn? Elliot waved him forward. I'd like you to meet Dr. Jason Williams from MIT. Jason, this is Deshawn Carter, the student partner I mentioned. Jason stood to shake Deshawn's hand. Professor Barnes tells me you provided the key insight during the showcase challenge. Impressive. Deshawn's face lit up at the recognition. I just saw a pattern. Professor Barnes was the one who taught me how to look for it. That sounds familiar, Jason smiled. He has a gift for helping others see what they're capable of. He turned back to Elliot. Speaking of which, my graduate students are waiting in the auditorium. Ready to meet them? As they walked through the hallways of Westbridge, Elliot found himself in a surreal position, being treated as a returning academic luminary in the same corridors he'd silently cleaned for years. Students who had once looked through him now watched with curious respect. Teachers who had barely acknowledged his existence stopped to introduce themselves. In the auditorium, 6 graduate students from MIT waited eagerly, their expressions brightening as Jason introduced Professor Elliot Barnes, whose work on algorithmic approaches to chaotic systems laid the groundwork for several current research initiatives. For the next 2 hours, Elliot found himself engaged in the kind of high-level mathematical discussion he'd once lived for, his mind reawakening to the intellectual challenges he'd denied himself for so long. The graduate students asked penetrating questions, showed him their research extensions of his original concepts, and treated him not as a curiosity, but as a respected colleague whose insights they valued. Deshawn sat quietly in the back row, absorbing the advanced concepts with intense concentration. Occasionally, when the discussion paused, he would ask a clarifying question that revealed his growing understanding, questions that impressed even the MIT students. After the session concluded, Jason pulled Elliot aside. Your young protege is remarkable. With the right guidance, he could go far in mathematics. He will, Elliot said with quiet certainty. I intend to make sure of it. About that, Jason said, MIT has a summer program for exceptional high school students. We typically require teacher recommendations, standardized test scores, the usual bureaucracy. But in this case, he glanced at Deshawn, who was deep in conversation with two of the graduate students. I'd like to offer him a place directly, based on your recommendation and what I've seen today. Elliot's expression was torn between pride and hesitation. It's a tremendous opportunity for him. But, Jason prompted, reading his former mentor's face, but I've just committed to building this mentorship program here, with Deshawn as co-director. He's central to the vision. The program starts in July, Jason said. He'd be back before the new school year. And what better preparation for leading a mentorship program than experiencing one of the best in the country? When they proposed the idea to Deshawn, his initial excitement was also tempered with reluctance. I'd be leaving right when we're starting to plan the mentorship program, he said, looking to Elliot. And my mom was counting on me working this summer to help with bills. The program includes a stipend, Jason assured him, more than you'd likely make at a summer job. And the planning will continue while you're gone, Elliot added. You'll bring back valuable insights from MIT that will strengthen our program. Deshawn's expression remained troubled. What if I can't handle it? Those graduate students are on another level. So were you, Elliot reminded him, when you solved the showcase problem. You belong in that environment, Deshawn. I wouldn't recommend you, if I wasn't certain. Later that afternoon, Elliot sat in his classroom alone, wrestling with conflicting emotions. He was genuinely thrilled for Deshawn's opportunity, proud of the young man's potential being recognized. Yet a small, selfish part of him feared losing the connection they'd built, worried that once Deshawn glimpsed the broader mathematical world at MIT, Westbridge would seem too small, too limiting. A light tap at the door interrupted his thoughts. Lily Porter entered, carrying a laptop and a determined expression. I've got the first rough cut of my documentary, she announced without preamble. 20 minutes focused on you, Deshawn, and how hidden potential often gets overlooked because of bias and appearances. Lily, I'm not sure I'm comfortable being the center of a film, Elliot began. That's why I'm showing you first, she countered, setting up her laptop. Watch it before you decide. The documentary opened with student interviews describing their first impressions of the janitor, contrasted with later realizations about who Elliot really was. It transitioned to Deshawn discussing how Elliot had recognized his potential when others dismissed him, then expanded to include stories from other overlooked individuals. A cafeteria worker who was a published poet, a school bus driver who had escaped civil war in his home country and held 2 advanced degrees. By the time it ended, Elliot was silent, moved by the understated power of the narrative Lily had crafted. Well, she prompted anxiously. It's excellent work, he said sincerely. You have a gift for storytelling. So you're okay with me submitting it to the Student Film Festival? And maybe some bigger ones after that? Elliot considered for a moment, then nodded. Yes, because it's not really about me. It's about seeing beyond surfaces and assumptions. Exactly, Lily beamed. Oh, and Principal Walsh wants to see you. Something about the mentorship program budget getting approved. After Lily left, Elliot made his way to the principal's office, where he found not only Margaret Walsh, but also a man he didn't recognize, expensively dressed, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to influence. Elliot, Margaret greeted him warmly, I'd like you to meet Thomas Harrington, chairman of our board of trustees and one of Westbridge's most generous supporters. Harrington extended his hand. Professor Barnes, I've heard a great deal about you. All exaggerated, I'm sure, Elliot replied with a small smile. On the contrary, Harrington said, I've just reviewed your proposal for the mentorship program. Quite impressive in scope and vision. The board has unanimously approved the full funding request. That's wonderful news, Elliot said, genuinely surprised. I expected we'd need to start smaller and build gradually. Sometimes bold ideas deserve bold support, Harrington said, especially when they align with our renewed commitment to making Westbridge more accessible to talented students regardless of background. The conversation continued with discussions of logistics, staffing, and implementation timelines. Throughout, Elliot was struck by Harrington's genuine interest and thoughtful questions, a sharp contrast to the detached, status-conscious trustees he'd encountered in academia. As the meeting concluded, Harrington added one more surprise. "My foundation would like to establish a scholarship in your name, Professor Barnes, the Elliot Barnes Excellence in Mathematics Scholarship, for students who demonstrate exceptional ability, despite challenging circumstances." Elliot was momentarily speechless. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Margaret urged gently. "Yes." Elliot nodded. "Thank you. That would be an honor." After Harrington left, Elliot remained with Principal Walsh, still processing the unexpected developments. "The program, the scholarship, it's all happening so quickly," he said. "The right idea, at the right time tends to gather momentum," she replied. "Your story has resonated beyond these walls, Elliot. People are hungry for narratives about justice and second chances." "I'm still adjusting to being visible again," he admitted. "After years of working to be invisible." "And how does it feel?" she asked. Elliot considered the question seriously. "Terrifying," he said finally. "And also, right." 1 year later, Elliot Barnes stood at the podium in the same auditorium where the mathematical showdown had taken place, addressing a very different audience. Before him sat 24 students, the first cohort of the Westbridge Mentorship Initiative, alongside their families, faculty mentors, and community supporters. "When we began this program," Elliot said, his voice steady and confident in a way that still sometimes surprised him, "we made a promise. Not that the path would be easy, but that you wouldn't walk it alone. Looking at what you've accomplished in just 1 year, I can say with certainty that you've more than fulfilled your part of that bargain." The students before him represented a dramatic shift in Westbridge's demographics, diverse in background, race, and economic circumstance, united by academic potential that might have gone unrecognized without the program. Each had been paired with a faculty mentor, provided with additional academic support, and challenged to excel beyond what they themselves had believed possible. In the front row, Deshaun Carter sat with particular pride. Now a senior preparing to attend MIT on a full scholarship, he had returned from the summer program with renewed purpose, throwing himself into developing and refining the mentorship initiative alongside Elliot. "Before I introduce our student speaker," Elliot continued, "I want to acknowledge that none of this would have been possible without the vision and courage of one person who saw potential where others saw only limitations." He gestured to Deshaun. "Mr. Carter reminded me of who I was when I had forgotten. His belief helped create everything you see today." Deshaun's expression registered surprise at the public acknowledgement, then a deep appreciation as he nodded to Elliot in silent understanding. The ceremony continued with student presentations, faculty recognitions, and the introduction of next year's expanded cohort. Throughout, Elliot found himself reflecting on the remarkable journey of the past year, from hidden janitor to respected teacher, from a man running from his past to one building a future. The academic world had indeed revisited his case, just as Jason had predicted. Princeton had formally apologized after a committee review found the original investigation procedurally flawed and potentially influenced by conflicts of interest. His papers had been reinstated in journals, his reputation substantially restored. Among peers, Dr. Martin Graves had faced his own reckoning, his other work scrutinized for irregularities once the emails with Victor came to light. Several universities had reviewed collaborations with him, finding patterns of claiming credit for others' insights and suppressing research that challenged his own. Though he retained his position, his influence had diminished significantly. For Victor Alden, he had left academia entirely, pursuing a corporate career far from Westbridge. Elliot had received one letter from him, not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement of how ambition and insecurity had led him to participate in something he knew was wrong. Elliot had not replied, but neither had he held on to his anger. Some debts could never be repaid. Some wounds would always leave scars. Moving forward didn't require forgiveness so much as a decision not to be defined by the injury. After the ceremony, Elliot found himself surrounded by students and parents eager to share their experiences and appreciation. Among them was a middle-aged woman in a nurse's uniform who introduced herself as Sandra Porter, Lily's mother. "I had to come straight from my shift," she explained. "But I wouldn't have missed this. What you've done here." She gestured to the diverse group of students chatting excitedly around them. "This is what education should be." "Lily deserves much of the credit," Elliot noted. "Her documentary really captured the heart of what we're trying to accomplish." "She always saw people clearly," Sandra smiled. "Got that from her father." Speaking of seeing clearly. She nodded toward the back of the room, where a custodian was quietly straightening chairs. "Is that Henry Jenkins?" Elliot followed her gaze. "Yes, he started at Westbridge about 6 months ago. Why?" "He was in my chemistry study group at community college. Brilliant mind, especially with organic chemistry. Never missed a question." Elliot watched Henry with new interest. "Really? I didn't know he had a background in science." "Most people don't ask," Sandra said pointedly. "They see the uniform, not the person." The observation struck Elliot deeply. Despite his own experience, he realized he'd fallen into the same pattern, seeing Henry as simply the new janitor rather than a complex individual with his own history and knowledge. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, Elliot approached Henry as he collected discarded programs and cups. "Mr. Jenkins," he began, "I understand you have a background in chemistry." Henry looked up, surprise evident on his face. "Used to. A long time ago. Would you have any interest in contributing to our science mentorship track? We're looking for someone with practical knowledge of organic chemistry to help guide a few students with particular aptitude in that area." Henry's expression shifted from surprise to cautious interest. "In what capacity?" "As a paid consultant to start," Elliot said, "with potential for more involvement if it's a good fit. Your maintenance schedule wouldn't be affected unless you wanted it to be." "I'd need to think about it," Henry said carefully. "It's been a while since I've taught anyone anything." "Take your time," Elliot assured him. "And Henry, thank you for your work here. The school wouldn't function without you." As Henry moved on to continue his duties, Deshawn joined Elliot, having observed the exchange. "Another hidden genius?" he asked. "Perhaps," Elliot smiled. "We seem to collect them at Westbridge." Full circle, Deshawn nodded appreciatively. From being the overlooked janitor to recognizing potential in others. "Speaking of potential," Elliot said, "have you decided which professor you'll work with at MIT?" "Dr. Williams, if he'll have me," Deshawn replied. "He's working on extensions of your original chaos theory applications. Thought it might be fitting to continue what you started." The sentiment touched Elliot deeply. "He'll be lucky to have you. Just don't forget your roots." "Not possible," Deshawn grinned. "You'll be getting weekly calls about this mentorship program whether you want them or not." 2 months later, on the last day of the school year, Elliot stood at his classroom window, watching students stream out of the building with the particular energy that only summer freedom could generate. His first year back in teaching had been challenging, exhausting, and more fulfilling than he had dared to hope. A knock at his door revealed Principal Walsh. "Admiring your handiwork?" she asked, joining him at the window. "Just thinking about how much can change in a year," he replied. "Indeed." She handed him a folder. "Speaking of which, I have something for you to consider over the summer. The board is creating a new position, Director of Academic Innovation, overseeing the mentorship program, developing new initiatives, working across departments to identify and support exceptional students regardless of background." Elliot opened the folder, skimming the job description. "This is ambitious." "So are you when you allow yourself to be," she said simply. "The position would be in addition to your teaching duties, with appropriate compensation and resources." "I'll need time to think about it," Elliot said, though the spark of interest in his eyes was unmistakable. "Of course, no rush." She turned to go, then paused. "Oh, and there's one more thing. Dr. Martin Graves will be speaking at the National Education Conference in Boston next month. Apparently, he's positioning himself as an advocate for academic integrity reforms." Her tone made her opinion of this development clear. Reinvention is a powerful human drive, Elliot observed neutrally. The organizing committee has asked if you would consider being a counterpoint speaker, sharing your perspective on how accusations can be weaponized and the importance of fair process. Elliot was silent for a long moment. The prospect of publicly confronting Dr. Graves, of standing before the academic community as an equal rather than a disgraced outcast, stirred complex emotions. "I'll consider it," he said finally. After Principal Walsh left, Elliot returned to organizing his classroom for the summer break. As he sorted through student work, he paused at a set of solutions to an advanced calculus problem he'd assigned as an extra credit challenge. One solution stood out: elegant, insightful, approaching the problem from an angle he hadn't anticipated. The student, Maria Diaz, was a quiet sophomore who rarely spoke in class, but whose work showed remarkable depth of understanding. She reminded him of himself at that age, more comfortable with numbers than people, finding in mathematics a language that made sense when the world often didn't. On impulse, Elliot wrote a note on her paper. "This approach shows exceptional mathematical insight. Have you considered participating in the mentorship program next year? I believe you have unique potential worth developing." He signed it simply, Professor Barnes, and placed it in her student file for the fall. It was a small gesture, the kind that most students might barely register. But Elliot knew from his own experience how powerful such moments of recognition could be, how a single teacher's belief could ignite confidence that changed the trajectory of a life. As the afternoon light slanted through the classroom windows, Elliot Barnes, once a rising academic star, then a fallen professor, then an invisible janitor, and now a teacher coming fully into his purpose, looked out at the campus that had become the setting for his unexpected second act. The road ahead wasn't clear or certain. There would be challenges in expanding the mentorship program, in potentially confronting Dr. Graves, in balancing teaching with new administrative responsibilities. But for the first time in 15 years, Elliot faced the future not with fear or resignation, but with a quiet, determined hope. He thought of Deshawn, preparing for MIT with the confidence of someone who knew his own worth. Of Lily, whose documentary had been accepted to 3 film festivals and was already changing perspectives. Of Henry Jenkins, who had tentatively agreed to help with the chemistry mentorship track, his initial hesitation giving way to cautious enthusiasm. And of all the other hidden talents still waiting to be discovered, in maintenance closets and cafeteria kitchens, in quiet corners of classrooms, in neighborhoods where potential often went unrecognized. "One recognition at a time," Elliot murmured. To himself, a mantra and a mission statement in 5 simple words. Gathering his belongings, he switched off the classroom lights and stepped into the corridor, moving forward with purpose, leaving behind both invisibility and shame, carrying instead the responsibility of seeing others clearly and the joy of helping them see themselves. Have you ever overlooked someone's true value because of how they earn a living? Elliot's journey from disgraced professor to respected mentor reminds us to look beyond appearances and recognize brilliance in unexpected places. Like and subscribe for more stories about second chances and hidden genius that will make you reconsider who deserves your attention.